In Super Mario Sunshine's second main level, Ricco Harbor, the player can, along the path to collecting the first Shine Sprite, quickly find themselves staring down this wall. This is one of my favorite walls in any game. A big part of why I love this wall is because I hate this wall. From a game design perspective, you could easily argue that this wall is just awful. Your path to the goal is directly ahead, but there is no directly ahead path. See, the key to good game design is to guide the player to whatever it is that the designer wants the player to see or do, in such a way that the player feels as though they came up with the idea to see or do said whatever themselves. Rico Harbor fails at this pretty miserably, but that's okay, given that Sunshine is meant to be accessible to very little kids, many of whom might not be able to figure out where to go without heavy guidance. And Rico Harbor offers heavy guidance via big arrows indicating that the way you're supposed to get to your destination is by traveling around this wall rather than trying to jump it. The actual path that the game wants you to go on is more complex than jumping the wall, but requires less direct skill in the core mechanics in order to make it to where you need to go. Meanwhile, the wall is just there. There's not one true way to get to the upper level of Rico Harbor, but there are several options. The obvious intended path is to take the crane system from the boat to the upper level, skipping the wall entirely. There's also the option of simply jumping around the wall to the platform at the end of the crane path and then taking the lift up. Depending on how many Shine Sprites you've unlocked, there's also a sewer pipe that opens up that Mario can go into that will eject him to the upper level. But, of course, none of these ways is the way up the wall that I figured out for the sake of playing through this level. What I've done, since as long as I can remember, is simply jump into the wall kick off, then use the hover nozzle to awkwardly maneuver my way to the platform. I jump the unjumpable wall. And while not the intended main path, I do believe that this wall was designed with the thought that a skilled enough player could figure out a way to jump it. The game doesn't subtly guide the player to developing this skill, which makes it feel like a failure of game theory. But this same sort of obtuse nature to the wall is what gives it significance. In fact, I'd argue that this wall communicates the most major theme of the game in microcosm. I'm generally fascinated by how environments and settings tell stories in and of themselves. The presence of a castle atop a hill communicates a combination of power and isolation. An empty field can simultaneously communicate loneliness and emptiness, but also serenity and contemplation. What environment you decide to make in a work of art, and especially in a game, can communicate meaning better than traditional storytelling. And the Mario franchise is one of the more interesting franchises in terms of how environments communicate meaning. Of the mainline Mario titles, I'd argue that Super Mario Sunshine is the best game in terms of how its environment communicates meaning and tells a story, and this wall in Rico Harbor condenses all of that to a single, brief moment of meaning. So let's back up. What actually is the story of Super Mario Sunshine? Despite being bare bones, there is a story to speak of, and it's actually one of the better stories in the main Mario series. Isle Delfino is a once peaceful community that has quickly turned sour at the arrival of a villainous, shadowy figure known as Shadow Mario. But the citizens of Isle Delfino don't know who Shadow Mario is and confuse the real Mario with this ghoulish hooligan. Mario is arrested for crimes he didn't commit, and consequently tasked with cleaning up the town, restoring the brightness of the sun by collecting Shine Sprites, and ridding the town of the shadowy menace. The key to understanding Sunshine's story is just knowing that Mario is, at first, not trusted by a local community of people who see him as an outsider to said community. They don't know him, they don't trust him, and at least a few of them don't even like him. But by the end of the game, this will change. Mario's heroism and general good nature will inevitably cause the citizens of Isle Delfino to warm up to him, eventually incorporating him into the local culture as one of their own. The individual levels tell a similar story. Each location in Isle Delfino has been terrorized by various forms of commotion or pollution that Shadow Mario has afflicted the area with. Mario then has to take care of the problem, restoring peace, and culminating in the final face-off in which Mario has to actually confront Shadow Mario himself. After confronting Shadow Mario, each area has one final Shine Sprite to collect. These Shine Sprites show the community restored to prosperity and joy, and often involve Mario engaging in some form of cultural tradition with the locals. Mario had to navigate a culture of initial hostility and indifference to him until he acclimated to them and became a part of their world. This happens both culturally and literally. On a cultural level, Mario acclimates by getting to know the personalities of the locals, learning their customs and traditions, and becoming involved with said traditions in the process. On a literal level, Mario acclimates by getting to know the local geography and developing a sense of familiarity with the buildings, the terrain, the wildlife, etc., just as the player does by playing the game. This progression is such that the last shine sprites in each level, rather than being the ultimate test of skill, are often instead just a chance to reflect on what each region of Isle Delfino is in its natural state. This is what I'd argue is the main theme of Sunshine. Acclimating to a local culture and becoming accepted as one of them through acts of good Samaritanism. For starters, this is the first Mario game that contextualizes the traditional gameplay of platforming in the Mario series with a story that matches the experience of play. And second, this is the first Mario game to feature naturalistic, or at least pseudo-naturalistic level design. Most areas of the game have some degree of quote-unquote realism, in that, rather than abstract level geometry, each area is meant to resemble and also represent a real local environment in which various creatures inhabit and form a community. I mean, think about it like this. Mario Sunshine is the first time where a Mario game has felt like it could reasonably be compared to parkour, because it's the first time where Mario is jumping around on buildings, cranes, natural rock formations and hills, caves, etc. It takes platforming and adapts it to something that somewhat resembles the real world, which is a rare and refreshing sight in a Mario game. So let's go back to that wall, keeping in mind what we've discussed so far. The typical truth about good game design is that you want to subtly guide the player to the correct way to play the game, but have the player feel like they discovered that way to play the game themselves. Even though on one level this wall can seem like bad game design, literally brick walling the player from progress until they find the ideal path marked by a big arrow, the fact that the player has so many different workarounds, including just brute forcing the wall with particular platforming skill, suggests that maybe this wall is actually very good design. The wall is directly in the path of where many players are likely to go, but it does end up communicating a theme about what can be done versus what is expected. It's apparent that you're not expected to scale the wall, but you can. And the fact that you ever so barely can scale the wall means that someone more perceptive or more skilled in traversing the game can easily scale the wall and have that become one, perhaps even a primary, way to play through this level. The wall initially presents itself as an insurmountable challenge, hostile to the player. But by acclimating to the environment, the wall becomes simply another piece on the path that Mario might take to make it through Ricco Harbor. Just like Mario acclimates to the culture of Isle Delfino, he, alongside the player, also acclimates to the physical environment of Isle Delfino. And this is why that wall carries so much meaning to me, because it ties the core theme of the game's story into the game's environmental design and game mechanics. Scaling this wall becomes a story of acclimating and becoming one with the local area, just the same as the actual narrative of the game. All throughout the game, there are little moments of meaning that reinforce this idea that Mario is going from a foreigner to one with his community and environment. He is going from unfamiliar with the terrain to familiar, as the player improves and figures out more ideal ways of traversing their environment. And that same meaning is communicated through the story and the dialogue. The Piantas and other creatures of Isle Delfino warm up to Mario because he is good-hearted, selfless, and able to step up to a challenge for the sake of helping out people he doesn't even know. Isle Delfino is a strange but peaceful place. Shadow Mario disrupts that peace, but Mario brings peace back. And by the end of the game, Isle Delfino gains back its peacefulness, but becomes a bit less strange. The player becomes one with the area. And eventually, this one wall doesn't look like such a problem. Thanks for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like it, I'm intending to make more short-form video essays about smaller details in video games. I have one already in the works about Luigi's Mansion, and will likely cover plenty of games both from Nintendo and other companies, mostly older games and probably some indie games too. I have a number of long-form video essays in the works, but want to break up the long-form video work with some more short-form videos because of how much time and energy it takes to actually complete the long-form videos. But if you do like long-form video essays about games, then be sure to check out my videos on Half-Life 2, Shadow of the Colossus, and the Stanley Parable. Of course, these videos wouldn't be possible without the support of my patrons over on Patreon. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon. You'll get to see parts of long-form video essays early, and get your name in the credits for upcoming videos. And last but not least, I wanted to mention that I'm working on a video game myself. It's a lo-fi, surreal adventure game called Dream Collider, and I'm hoping to have a playable demo of the game available to everyone sometime over the summer. Supporting my channel also helps support the development of Dream Collider and possibly more games in the future. Be on the lookout for more videos soon, and have a great day.